Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are excited to have Cam Taylor joining us here. He's a grief mentor and coach living outside Vancouver, Canada. We're excited to get to know him and to dive in all the amazing things he does to help you. And he can really help support you and coach you, educate you with grief and so much more. So first and foremost, welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Well, pleasure having you, and we're excited to talk to you and to find out more about you. So a little overview as the work that you do. Would you mind sharing as a grief mentor and coach? Tell me what you specifically do.
I do a variety of things because this whole area of grief and loss, there's two basic groups. One is the people that have had the loss. And so one of the things I do is I come alongside in a variety of ways just to help people that are actually grieving with empathy, with information, with support. Grieving people need people who will listen to them and people that will help facilitate places where they can share and tell their stories. So that's one part, the way that I help those that are grieving. But I also help people they just need support to figure out, how do I support those in my life that are grieving? Whether that's a professional who's in a business setting or a nonprofit setting, or whether it's a friend or a colleague that has no idea, what do I do for my friend that's had a loss? I don't know what to say. So I help both those that are experiencing grief and those that are wanting to really support those that are grieving.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I know you even wrote a book called Unlocking the Mystery of Grief. I want to talk about that. And also, you have video resources that help so many. But before we dive into the work you do, first and foremost, I think it's important to just get to know you as a person. So if you don't mind backing up and tell me a little bit about yourself. It's kind of your backstory. Where were you born? What happened in your life? I'm sure you had your own trauma and grief. We just want to get to know you on a personal level and then find out why you chose this career to get into. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks. And that truly is important. As I help others, they're looking at me and saying, well, why should I have you help us?
Yeah.
And so that's a great question. I was born in the middle of Canada on the flat prairies many years ago and grew up there most of my life. So I think I learned a lot growing up, especially in the area of resiliency. And I want to come back to that in just a second, but I'm a brother with two sisters, ended up out here on the west coast of Canada. I got married in my early 20s to my wife, Vicky, and we enjoyed 36 years together and had two children that are now adult children. And one of the reason I got involved in this whole area is that in 2020, right at the beginning of COVID, my wife had severe back pain and we weren't sure what it was. So we'd go to the hospital and the doctors didn't know what it was. But then eventually she had some tests and it revealed that she had cancer, kidney cancer. And by the time we found out that she had cancer, it was already stage 4. And we found that out at the end of March of 2020. Wow. And she died on May 14th, 2020. So we had these 6 weeks together to say our goodbyes and help her with the end of her life. Myself, family, her family, we were able to just walk alongside of her. And so that was an experience that I had no idea what I was doing, to be honest. And so I found friends. I did have a lot of supportive people, empathetic people that would listen to me and let me tell my story over and over and over again. But I found that, I was lost. So I did lots of reading, lots of learning. And then it was a few months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop and this light bulb sort of came on inside of me. And I was writing in my journal. I'm a big journaler. I believe in that big time. And I was writing along and there was this voice, or however you hear those things, however I hear those things. And it was saying to me, you're supposed to be a grief mentor. And I said, wait a second. It's too soon. It's only been like 4 months. And I knew it was a little bit too soon, but I let that sit there and I let that sort of percolate inside of me. And it wasn't too long after that, I did my first grief group online gathered some friends together, some people that were grieving, and I realized I can give back what I've learned. I'm still on this journey, but I could start to give it back, and been doing that ever since and continuing my learning journey. And it's really been very rewarding. And I think it comes from that place of, I'm called to do this. I'm not doing this because I have to. I want to help grieving people, give them the same help that I receive myself.
Thank you for sharing, and so sorry for your loss and all that you went through, but I understand. My own experience with loss, my mom, she passed away of lung cancer 8 years ago, and I took care of her for a year and a half, and it was the most beautiful, hardest thing, right? But, with a 2-month-old baby, a 2-year-old son, and she lived with me. I took care of her. I could empathize, and a lot of people out there can. And I just also want to point out, sometimes grief is not just about losing a person, a family member, a friend. It's also it could be loss of a job, right? Grief could be loss of a way of life, I'm sure there's all different aspects of grief, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And I've thought a lot about that, and I've run into people. They've retired, and now they're totally lost, and they're hurting, and they don't know. Well, let's just start with, let's just validate how you feel. Let's grieve the loss of what you had, what you knew. So I couldn't agree more with you. There's so many different kinds of losses. I call them the faces of loss. Then they show up in many different ways. And obviously we all think of losing loved ones, but you're absolutely right. All grief, all loss needs to be grieved on some level. Of course, some losses are a lower intensity, so you don't need as much grief, but it all matters, and we need to process it for sure.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us again, for being here. And we're going to dive into a lot of the ways that you're helping people. So, here we are. And if you are just joining us, a Good Grief Journey, I know you can get your guidance and support. You also offer people a PDF to get started, right? 50 ways to grieve your losses. And that's something they can get just by going to the website, right?
That's right. Yeah. goodgriefjourney.com. There's a few access to a few resources. One of them is 50 ways to grieve your losses. It's different for everybody. We all grieve differently. We need to realize that, wait a second, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
There are so many different ways that we grieve, and it's good. That kind of information, those ideas are so important to hear about.
Oh, well, let's talk a little bit further about, what does it look like to grieve in a healthy way, in a sense? Let's talk about what some of the good grief is, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I've very intentionally came up with that idea of good grief. Not good in the sense of, good. There's good grief, Charlie Brown. We know that phrase, which is more of a negative nature to it. When I say good, I'm really talking about thorough grief. A good piece of wood is good all the way through. And so when I talk about grief, I really feel that the people that don't grieve thoroughly or in a good way can sometimes sort of push off their grief, for example. Mm-hmm. And so I've sort of reflected on my own journey of what are the different elements that I needed to grieve well and thoroughly. And that's where I've created my good grief model, GOOD, which I can get into as well. But it's this idea that grief, to be healthy, that leads to getting to the place in your life where you can actually start to learn to live again, where you get up in the morning and it isn't all you can think about, where you can start to make room for life and new relationships and new experiences. And I'm a big believer through experience, but right now I'm leading an 8-week grief group at hospice, and I'm seeing in front of my eyes these people that are raw in their grief. And as we go through the good grief model, or these particular ideas and practices, getting empathy and opening ourselves up to people and to new ideas and orienting ourselves with this resiliency, that eventually we start to realize, you know what? Life is not over. I am learning to live again. So that's a little bit of what that really means.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And also, I know you kind of want to dive into a little bit about, some misconceptions about grief, right? Could you share?
Yeah, let me just touch on a few of those. And this is what I find, that people who are grieving are inundated with messages from family members, from people at work, from their peers, from even social media, wherever, are these ideas about grief that are not helpful. So here's one of them that comes to mind instantly is that you shouldn't, when you're grieving, you should just grieve, and pretty soon you should be over it and you can get on with your life. So that's one misconception. And so what I always help grieving people with is, well, let's talk about what's actually true. If that's the misconception, let's kind of put that to bed or bury that and come up with. So the truth is that grief will go on indefinitely in your life. And if you're feeling your grief, the last thing you want to do is have somebody say, you should be over it by now, because there is no getting over it.
Yeah.
What I find is a good way to describe it is you want to travel with your grief, and your grief will go with you. And it's not about getting over it. It is about enlarging your life and adding new experiences and new people. But you always treasure that memory of that person that you've lost, or that experience that you had and that you lost. And so I think it's important to kind of put that one, bury that one. One other one that comes to mind is a distinction between grief and mourning are the same thing. And where I learned this was from Alan Wolfelt, who's an educator, very experienced in this area of grief. And he says that grief, and this is how he defines it, and we can define those terms however we want, but I found this definition helpful. Grief is the internal reality of what goes on inside of us when we have a loss. It's the emotions, the sadness, the anger, the shame, the guilt, all the things that nobody sees happens. So that's an important part of our grief journey. We need to validate that and so on. But the other side, we need to mourn, which he describes as the outward expression of the grief that's going on inside of us. And that's this reality. We need people that will actually listen to our story, where we can get out what we're feeling. I'm feeling angry and I don't entirely know why, or I miss this person so much. And so these mourning, often they're rituals, these times we have of coming together and remembering our loved one, that would fall in the element of the outward expression, which if you have one without the other, you do not grieve thoroughly. You need them both. Grief, internal reality and validating that, and you need to be able to let that out and express it and share that together in community, with family, with friends, with empathetic witnesses.
And so you want to discuss, a little bit about your programs, what's next, how you're helping people. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can be of service. Do you want to share? There's different.
Yeah, No, sounds good. And one thing, if you go to my website, goodgriefjourney.com, there are a few ways that you can kind of access the things I've created, the ways that I help people. One is I do have a sample of my book, Unlocking the Mystery of Grief. Oh. And you could read the first couple of chapters there if you'd like. And that will give you a feel for the book. I've really written the book as a very accessible resource for grieving people and for people that want to learn about grief, so that you can talk to a friend, talk to a loved one, and have some language for the support. So that book is easy to read, short chapters. That gives you a sample of that. And the other thing is, if you want to talk to me, I'd be willing to give you a free conversation, 20, 30 minutes, where I can hear a bit of your story. And then if you decide, I'd like a little more help. Yeah. I'd like to talk with you on a regular basis. I do provide that mentoring, that coaching for you as well. So that's a couple of ways, plus the 50 ways to grieve your losses. The PDF is there as well. But those are some ways that I could potentially help you and give you some tools, some resources, some support for what you might be going through right now.
Got it. Wow, thank you. And when did you write a book? Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Well, the book actually came out last summer. Now, the interesting thing about writing, I've written a few books. I wrote another book a few years ago on a motorcycle accident I had that's called Detour. And it really was, I learned so much about loss and about grief and about trauma in that whole experience. So I learned to write while I was recovering 3-year recovery from this accident. And so I had the tools to write. And then when this happened, when this loss happened, I thought, I need to write about it. So I started writing, blogging, writing my thoughts, my feelings, journaling. And then I really sat myself down and said, I need to put this into a book format because I want people to get the help that they need. And actually, hospice, where I volunteer, they're using my book as a resource that they're giving to grieving people. So it's really, I'm so excited to be able to put into people's hands ideas, support. Okay, now I have some handles to hang on to so that I can actually take this journey. So writing is something I really enjoy, and this is a way for me to sort of take what I've learned and share it more widely with more and more people.
And where can we get a copy of the book? Oop, I'm cutting in and out. Where can you get a copy?
Well, if you go online, you'll be able to find that, and and there's the big normal place where people find books on Amazon. It is definitely available there, and that's probably the best approach. I am in the process of creating the Audible version of it, and it's good for me to state that out loud so that I get on it and complete that project. But I'd like it to be available in that format as well.
Well, also the fact that, you're here I know you're based out of, British Columbia, right? You're in Canada?
That's right.
But you're working with people all over the world. Is that true?
For sure. I do. I have had contacts from all over, for sure. And I look forward to, and I just love people of all backgrounds. And so regardless of where you're coming from, now I do only speak English, but I really resonate and I connect with people from all over the world. And I know that grief is not something that is culture specific. All cultures grieve. Now they grieve in different ways, and I've definitely learned that. But there's so much loss in our world, so much hurt in our world, and I want to make just a little bit of difference to help people with what they've experienced and what they're feeling, what they're going through.
Got it. Thank you. And you mentioned also self-compassion and self-care. Tell me a little bit about what that means and the importance of that to someone who is grieving,
One thing I notice with people who are grieving, especially if they have other family members or friends or work situation where they're called upon to be helping others with their grief, or they find themselves so busy with their lives after a loss that unfortunately, if you're in that spot, you don't actually take the time to focus on yourself. And sometimes we forget the fact that one of the most critical elements of the grief journey, especially if you're going to grieve thoroughly and heal, is you have to turn the mirror toward yourself and say, what do I need? So that I am showing myself compassion. And for starters, it's don't be too hard on yourself. I remember I had a sister, one of my sisters said to me, be kind to yourself. She said that over and over again. And eventually it started to sink in. What does that mean anyways? And I know I started going bike riding the day after my wife died. And it was a form of self-care. It was something that I enjoyed doing. And that particular practice became this daily routine that took me out into a place where I was getting exercise, which was a healthy part of my grief journey and what I needed to look after myself. But it also allowed me to cry and to feel joy almost simultaneously. And so self-care is critical, doing what you enjoy, going to a movie, making yourself a bath, fill up the bathtub and get into it and put on your candles, whatever it means to be kind to yourself, and to yourself if you're listening to this, to find ways regularly, weekly to do that, because you matter. You are important, and kindness shown to yourself will help you realize, you know what? I am loved. I am worth looking after and caring about because I have a life and I want to live and I want to grieve pretty well.
Oh, Beautifully said. Wow. 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 And I would love to hear, if you don't mind sharing a story or two of someone that you've helped work alongside and kind of go over, the grief process with someone and how that helped them tremendously.
Well, let me go back to a story. It's a story of a person in one of the grief groups that I've led at the hospice. Because what I notice is that, right now I'm actually leading an 8-week group, and there's somebody that's been helping me that has a tremendous story of coming into the group originally. But I want to talk about that situation. But there was a lady that had come to the group, and she had had a very difficult time grieving, and she'd lost a son, an adult son. And in her particular context, she just was lost, and she wasn't getting the support from home that she really needed to actually express herself and express her hurt and her loss. So she came to the group and she started, and it's interesting how always people are very apprehensive, and I think that's just true in relationships. Who can I trust? Who is going to be a safe person for me to tell my vulnerable story to? And that's true even when I'm connecting one-on-one, but I've seen it. I saw it with this lady. She came into this group and she realized in that first meeting where I tried to create a safe place where people could start to tell their story, she realized this was potentially that safe place. So she started to share her story, and week after week she came, and I share ideas in this group, and people are learning and they're listening to each other. Just a good mixture of ideas and empathy, those two things going together. So a few weeks into the course, she'd come back to one of the sessions, and she said to the group, "You're not going to believe what happened this week or last week," because we talked about allowing emotion to be felt, and the value of tears and getting this out. Well, on her way home from the week before, she broke down into tears, and she actually couldn't drive. She had to pull over, and she just sobbed. Tears of grief, tears of sorrow, and so much was just starting to kind of be uncapped. The cap was taken off of her grief. And she came back, and it's like a load was starting to lift that was weighing her down.
Yeah.
And you could tell, I was sitting there thinking, that's why I do this. That's why we come together, why I want to create safe places where people can come and start to learn, okay, this is okay. I want to validate things like that. So that's one story of so many of how learning those ideas, getting that empathy can just lead to breakthroughs and moments of healing, moments of, oh, wow, man, that's quite amazing. Because these people that we lose, it's such a mixture of feelings that people have. And so when you can just start to be supported, it makes so much difference.
Wow. Thank you so much. And in our last few minutes together, I would just, want to ask, what is it, out there that you can reach people today that are going through grief? What do you want to say to them?
What comes to mind right away is if you are on the front end, if your loss has just happened and you have no idea how life will go on for you, my encouragement to you is, and it might be hard to actually believe this, is that I want you to know that if you grieve well, if you grieve thoroughly and you find some support and get some of those ideas, that it won't always be this intense. It won't always be this all-consuming where it's all you can think about and you can't focus on anything else. That the intensity of grief actually will be reduced over time as you grieve well.
Okay. Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cam. How can we reach out to you?
Go to my website. It's the best way for you to do that, goodgriefjourney.com. And on there's a few ways that you can reach me, send me a message, contact me directly, or download some of my resources. That would be the best way. But I look forward to staying in touch with many of you.
Thank you so much. Pleasure having you here today, and thank you for doing what you do to help so many people, and looking forward to speaking with you again soon. Thanks so much, Cam. Really, this is great work you're doing, helping so many people. And people out there, you can be helped. Reach out. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.